أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا اللهم انصر من نصر الدين فاجعلنا منهم واخذل من خذل الدين ولا تجعلنا منهم. So today we will continue reading the places where one would need sabr. And Imam Ghazali already talked about how you need sabr when you want to obey Allah Ta'ala and when you want to do good deeds. And now he is going to talk about how you need sabr to resist against disobeying Allah Ta'ala. So الضرب الثاني, the second part, the areas where you need sabr, al-ma'asi, disobedience to Allah Ta'ala, the actions that are considered to be disobedience to Allah Ta'ala, you need sabr, during these occasions, to resist against disobeying Allah Ta'ala. فَمَا أَحْوَجَ الْعَبْدَ إِلَى الصَّبْرِ عَنْهَا. So this is the place where you need sabr most. فَمَا أَحْوَجَ الْعَبْدَ, this is feel ta'ajjub. This is what you learn at the end of the MSILA when you study sarf. See, فَمَا أَحْوَجَ الْعَبْدَ إِلَى الصَّبْرِ عَنْهَا. So وقد جمع الله تعالى أنواع المعاصي في قوله تعالى. Allah Ta'ala brought together different types of acts of disobedience to him in the following verse. وَيَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ وَالْبَغْيِ. So Allah Ta'ala prohibits you from committing al-fahsha, al-munkar, al-bagh. So these are three types of sins of disobedience to Allah Ta'ala. So al-fahsha means open sin, or committing sins openly in the public sphere, in the presence of other people. This is called fuhsh or fahsha. It's open, explicitly, openly disobeying Allah Ta'ala. This is the worst thing, because committing a sin is a mistake, but committing it openly, within society, by showing other people, when people see you, that's double mistake, double sin, because this way you are not only committing the sin but also publicizing it, advertising it. So that's why even if one commits a sin, if it's secretly done, without letting other people know about it, it's less harmful. It's a lesser sin compared to a sin committed openly in front of other people. So this is jahr bisu, exposing your sins to other people. This is kind of advertising it, and also encouraging other people that you are doing it and others may also do it. But if it's secretly done, so even if there are other people who are considering doing the same thing, they will be discouraged because they will think other people are not doing it. So if I do it, I'll be embarrassed. It will be shame for me. But when they see like other people are doing it, committing those sins, this will give them courage that they can do it without feeling any shame. So munkar is disliked despite actions. It's also another form of sin. This is opposite of ma'ruf. Ma'ruf means a good action known by people that it's a good action. Ma'ruf also means known. So ma'ruf means a good action which is known by everybody, or which is acknowledged or accepted by everyone. It's a good action. So it's universally accepted as a good action. But munkar is a disliked, disapproved action, the opposite of the ma'ruf. So people know that it's bad and they disapprove it. Uh, so and baghi means, going against the will of Allah Ta'ala, rebelling Allah Ta'ala, because Allah Ta'ala has orders to us, and we have to obey those orders. And when you commit a sin, you are disobeying and rebelling against Allah Ta'ala. So every sin is a rebellion against Allah Ta'ala, and every good deed and every good action is obedience to Allah Ta'ala. So that's why sin is also called baghi. Sin is also called isyan, rebellion against Allah Ta'ala. وقال صلى الله عليه وسلم, and Rasulullah عليه الصلاة والسلام said, المهاجر من هجر السوء والمجاهد من جاهد هواه. Rasulullah said the true muhajir, because the muhajirun, people who made hijrah from Mecca to Medina to support Rasulullah والسلام, and they sacrificed a lot. They left their homes, they left their business, they left their families and relatives in Mecca and moved to Medina only for the sake of freely practicing their religion and being together with other Muslims as a community. So they have a very high status in Islam. But Rasulullah said that this status of being a muhajir does not belong only to those who moved from Mecca to Medina. Any Muslim may have this position, and any human being may attain this high status. How? Al-muhajiru man hajara su. The muhajir is the one who abandons negative or bad or wrong actions. Muhajir is the one who leaves sins and evil actions as bad actions, wrong actions. وَالْمُجَاهِدُ مَنْ جَاهَدَ هَوَاهُ. And also mujahid is a high status in Islam, similar to muhajir. They are praised by Allah Ta'ala. But here Rasulullah expands the meaning of mujahid, similar to the way he expanded the meaning of muhajir. He says people who fight against their carnal desires, hedonistic desires, excessive desires, they are also mujahids. They are also rewarded by Allah Ta'ala as if they are making war. So this is inner jihad. This is inner battle, inner war. A human being's inner world is like a battlefield. Evil motivations fight against good motivations inside a human being. So that's why the inner world of every human being is a place where conflicting desires, conflicting ideas take place, and the fight goes on inside every human being here, between these opposing inclinations, opposing ideas. But the believers, they usually fight against those evil aspirations, evil motivations, evil inclinations, and follow God's guidance in the right direction. وَالْمَعَاصِي مُقْتَضَى بَاعِثِ الْهَوَى. The sins, the acts of rebellion, against Allah Ta'ala, they are required by hedonistic motives. They are outcomes of the hedonistic motives. So hedonistic motives push people to rebel against Allah Ta'ala. وأشد أنواع الصبر عن المعاصي. So the most difficult kind of sabr is the sabr against sins, against acts of rebellion towards Allah Ta'ala. الصبر عن المعاصي التي صارت مألوفة بالعادة. But resisting or against inclination or motivation, to commit a sin is very difficult. But there is something even more difficult, which is the sins that you are addicted to, the sins that you are accustomed to. مألوفة بالعادة. مألوفة بالعادة means, accustomed behaviors, and they became your custom, your habit. So if a sin becomes the habit of a person, the addiction of a person, he needs sabr most. And this is the most difficult situation in which one makes this fight, resistance. So the biggest or the most intense internal conflict. فإن العادة طبيعة خامسة. Because habit is the fifth nature. So according to traditional understanding of human beings are created from 4 elements. Actually, like everything in nature is created from 4 elements: fire, soil, air, and water. And these 4 elements give different natures to human being. So like one nature emanates from fire, it is like passion, power. They assume that this comes from fire, in the composition of human beings. So an-nar leads to shaghaf and quwwa. And then there is turab, the soil or the dust. So it's another nature, tabi'ah, and stability, persistence comes from turab to human beings. And hawa, the air, gives human beings thinking and contemplation. So that's another nature. And water gives another nature to human beings. It's sensibilities, compassion, emotions. Like water, gives emotions. So like human emotions originate from the water in human constitution. So this is the traditional medicine and psychology. I'm sure Human Hoja knows these things better. So these are four tabi'at, يعني الطبيعات الأربعة or الطوابع الأربعة. So 4 natures of human beings, originating from fire, soil, air, and water. But habit is the 5th nature, on top of these 4 natures, according to Imam Ghazali. فإذا انضافت العادة إلى الشهوة تظاهر جندان من جنود الشيطان على جند الله تعالى. So he's making very interesting point. So because he already talked about the army of the shahwats, army of the hedonistic desires, the army of the appetite. But he says if the army of the appetite, hedonistic desire, uh, is coupled together, or supported together, or if there is an alliance, between the army of shahwat, and also the habits, and shahwat and habits, shahwa and ada, if they are together, tazahara jundan, it's like two army, of the shaitan, vis-a-vis the army of God. So, the army of God is akal, intellect. So the intellect must fight, against not only the army of shahwat, but also the army of adat. So that's why, big fights, and you need forbearance, big resistance, against the two powers inside. فلا يقوى باعث الدين على قمعها. So that's why the religious motive inside a human being cannot root it out, cannot pull it out, from the heart, because باعث الشهوة is supported and allied with al-ada. So that's why it becomes very difficult. So Ghazali is saying that this is the occasion one needs sabr most. It's the most challenging, most difficult occasion. But if one only has like shahwa without habit, then it's easier. But if the shahwa and habit are combined, that's too difficult. ثم إن كان ذلك الفعل مما يتيسر فعله كان الصبر عنه أثقل على النفس. So Rahimahullah is saying that if the act of disobedience or the sin is something easy to do, then resistance against it becomes more difficult. So the amount of resistance and the easiness, are inversely related. So if a sin is easy to do, then you need more amount of sabr, to resist against it. Why? Because sabr an ma'asi lisan. Said he's giving an example of like the sins with the tongue. The sins one commit with tongue, such as من الغيبة والكذب والمراء والثناء على النفس تعريضا وتصريحا وأنواع المزح المؤذي للقلوب ودروب الكلمات التي يقصد بها الإزراء والاستحقار وذكر الموتى والقدح فيهم وفي علومهم وسيرهم ومناصبهم. So examples of sins by tongue or verbal sins, verbal disobedience to Allah Ta'ala include backbiting, al-ghiba, kidib, lying, mira, unnecessary discussions, quarrels, just to defeat the other side. Mira is the opposite of munazara. Munazara is a good discussion with the purpose of discovering the truth. But mira is a discussion just to overcome the other side, to inflate one's ego by silencing or defeating the other side. So mira is a big sin, but it's easy to do it. Like ghibat is easy, just uttering one sentence, or lying is easy. That's why it's difficult, to resist against it. and also getting involved in a unnecessary discussion, quarreling. والثناء على النفس, praising, one's own self, تعريضا أو تصريحا, either indirectly or directly, praising one's own self directly or indirectly through speech. This is also something very easy, just say one sentence, right? Not so difficult. That's why it's very difficult to resist against it. وأنواع المزح المؤذي للقلوب, and also hurting or offending jokes, easy to do, just one or two sentences, but people get offended by that kind of joke. وضروب الكلمات التي يقصد بها الإزراء والاستحقار, and the same way, uttering, downgrading, degrading words is also very easy. One can utter it easily, no problem, but it's a big, and that's why, because it's easy, it's difficult to resist against it. وذكر الموتى والقدح فيهم وفي علومهم وسيرهم ومناصبهم, and also saying bad things about the dead people, about the diseased people who are not alive, and dishonoring them, discrediting their knowledge and their character and their positions, easy, because they don't live, they cannot respond back, so you can speak against them easily. فإن ذلك في ظاهره غيبة, so the talking about the dead people externally, this is غيبة, it's backbiting. وفي باطنه ثناء على النفس, but every backbiting is implicitly self-praise. Why? Because when you discredit other people, you are implicitly praising yourself. When you downgrade other people by backbiting against them, whether they are alive or bad or dead, implicitly you are kind of elevating yourself, praising yourself. They are bad people, I am good. So this is a very interesting analysis by Ghazali. فَلِلنَّفْسِ فِيهِ شَهْوَتَانِ. So when someone makes a ghiba, ghibat of the living people or dead people, so there are two appetites involved, two hedonistic desire involved in that situation. First, nafyul ghayr, discrediting the other person. وَالْأُخْرَى إِثْبَاتُ نَفْسِهِ. And the second one, proving your own self, praising your own self. So ghibat includes two things, two desires. One, discrediting, downgrading, degrading another person, but at the same time, directly or indirectly, implicitly or explicitly, promoting yourself, proving yourself. وبهما تتم له الربوبية التي في طبعه. So by these two things, nef and isbat, one's desire for godness, الربوبية, is achieved, is completed. So according to Sufis and according to Ghazali also, there is a shahwat in human beings, to declare himself as God. So rububiyyah, so human beings have this hidden inclination in themselves to act like God, so, and God, I mean, when you look at the status of God, he's above everyone else. So every human being, who follows this desire to be God, wants to become at the top of everyone else, and to subjugate all other people to himself. Uh, so this rububiyyah, which exists in human nature, is manifested in the act of ghibat. So the person who's doing ghibat, on the one hand, nafyul ghayr, downgrading others and promoting himself. وهي ضد ما أمر به من العبودية. But this is just opposite of the ubudiyyat, which is commanded by Allah Ta'ala. Because the ubudiyyat requires that you don't see yourself at the top. You see Allah at the top. And also you don't try to discredit and subjugate other people. You don't try to enslave them to yourself. That's ubudiyyat. So every human being has inside drive for rububiyyat and drive for ubudiyyat. So يعني باعث الهوى, drive of hawa, and باعث الدين, drive of religion. So there is باعث الربوبية, people have this drive to act like God, but at the same time they have this drive to act like abd, the slave of Allah Ta'ala. والاجتماع الشهوتين وتيسر تحريك اللسان ومصير ذلك معتادا في المحاورات يعسر الصبر عليها. So why is it so difficult, to have sabr against verbal sins, against backbiting, lying, downgrading other people and making bad jokes about them and mocking them? Why? It's because الاجتماع الشهوتين, two shahwats, two drives, are coupled in that case. The shahwat of downgrading other people and the shahwat of promoting yourself, and وتيسر تحريك اللسان, and this is coupled with easy action of the tongue. ومصير ذلك معتادا في المحاورات, plus this is the custom in conversations. That's another element contributing to pushing people towards committing that kind of sin. يعسر الصبر عليها. That's why it would be very difficult, to have sabr, to resist against committing a verbal sin. Verbal sins are easy to do, and they are, outcomes of the, two drives inside a human being. وهي أكبر الموبقات. But, verbal sins are the most destructive, most harmful sins. حتى بطل استنكارها واستقباحها من القلوب. They are very harmful, but at the same time, it's futile, to reject them, to criticize them, to tell that they are bad. So in one's heart, it's not easy, to tell your heart that, ghibat is bad, like verbal sins are bad, because they are all rooted, in one's heart. Even if you try to tell this to your heart, it's futile, not easy. لكثرة تكررها, because it's repeated so much. وعموم الأنس بها, and people are familiar with it. They are accustomed to it. and everybody is doing it. So that's why it's not easy to reject it. It's not easy to convince yourself that this is something bad. فترى الإنسان يلبس حريرا مثلا فيستبعد ذلك عنه غاية الاستبعاد. And you may see a man wearing silk, and people criticize him. They say, oh, it's not good for you. You should stay away from it, from wearing silk. Silk is really bad for men to put on. ويطلق لسانه طول النهار في أعراض الناس ولا يستنكر ذلك. But the same person speaks freely about the dignity and honor of other people, but no one criticizes him. No one tells him this is bad. Don't do it. Why? Because people are all used to this sin. But the sin of wearing silk for men is not something people used to it. مع ما ورد في الخبر من أن الغيبة أشد من الزنا. Although the hadith mentions that committing غيبة, backbiting is worse than committing adultery. ومن لم يملك لسانه في المحاورات لم يقدر على الصبر على ذلك. So if someone cannot control his tongue during his conversations, he will not be able to resist or show sabr against verbal sins. فيجب عليه العزلة والانفراد. So if you cannot control your tongue in your conversations, and if you fail to show sabr against the drives for committing verbal sins, then you must leave society. You must isolate yourself and live alone, to protect yourself from committing verbal sins. فلا ينجيه غيره. Nothing else will help him. فالصبر على الانفراد أهون من الصبر على السكوت مع المخالفات. So sabr for self-isolation, is easier than the sabr to keep silence when you are socialized with other people. So that's why Ghazali is giving a very practical advice. So when you socialize with other people, if you are committing verbal sins, backbiting, downgrading other people, offending others, making downgrading jokes, etc., mocking them, then he says, stay away from society, isolate yourself until you learn control of your tongue. وتختلف شدة الصبر في آحاد المعاصي باختلاف داعية تلك المعصية في قوتها وضعفها. And so this was an example of like what makes sabr more difficult. So if committing the sin is easier, if one is habituated, like made a habit of committing that sin, and if that sin is commonly committed by people, so sabr against it becomes more difficult. And وتختلف شدة الصبر في أحد المعاصي. So the power of sabr changes, from sin to sin باختلاف الداعية تلك المعاصي, depending on the drive behind that sin. Depending on the drives behind the sins, the difficulty of showing sabr changes from one situation to other situation, So sometimes you need more powerful sabr, but sometimes less powerful sabr may be sufficient in some situations. وأيسر من حركة اللسان حركة الخواطر باختلاج الوسارس. So there is something easier than movement of the tongue, which is movement of one's thoughts, due to confusion emerging from وسوسة, from shaitan. فلا جرم يبقى حديث النفس العزلة. There is no doubt that inner talk, continues even when one is isolated. ولا يمكن الصبر عنه أصلا. So it is not possible, to resist against inner talk. So one cannot stop inner talk. That's too difficult to do. إلا بأن يغلب على القلب. But Ghazali gives us here a very interesting method, which is, the method I always apply and I always recommend. So if there's a bad inner talk, in one's heart, so what's the method to stop it? Ghazali says, impossible to stop it, except there is one method to stop it. It is by diverting attention to something else, by keeping yourself busy with something else. إلا بأن يغلب على القلب هم آخر في الدين يستغرقه. The only way is to make another concern dominate, prevail over your hearts. Then that bad or useless or wrong inner talk coming out of one vesvese will stop. Otherwise, there is no other way. So basically, start a new inner talk. Initiate a new inner talk about a good concern. A new inner talk about something that overwhelmingly occupies your heart, your thinking. Okay, so basically, don't tell your heart stop thinking this because it's useless. Tell your heart start thinking that. Okay, offer an alternative. And when your heart starts thinking that alternative issue, the other is forgotten. So this is cure. This is a good treatment for the heart. Very useful, very useful, and it's a very effective method. So if someone is busy with some useless or harmful concerns and ideas, it is useless to tell him stop thinking them. Just offer him an alternative to think about it, to keep him busy with these things. But the same thing with the education of the children. If you tell children, don't do something, it's useless. Just give them an alternative to do. So then, their energy and attention is channelized to this new thing. Then they forget the other thing and start doing that. So the best way is to offer an alternative to yourself and keep yourself busy with that alternative. Otherwise, if you don't keep yourself busy with good alternatives, Shaitan will keep you busy with wrong things. كمن أصبح وهمومه هم واحد. He says a good example for this is that sometimes people don't even sleep because their mind is preoccupied with some idea, with some concern. So when that person is completely preoccupied with this concern, this idea during the night, no other idea or no other waswasa can come and enter to his heart, to his mind. So keep yourself, busy with good things, so that no other thing can come in. So zikrullah is the best way to keep your heart busy. Zikrullah is the best way to keep your heart busy. So zikrullah is the vaccination of the heart against, waswasa, the virus of waswasa. Waswasa is like the virus, and you vaccinate yourself, you protect yourself from the waswasas by keeping your heart always busy with the zikr of Allah Ta'ala. وإلا فإن لم يستعمل الفكرة في شيء معين لم يتصور فتور الوسواس عنه. So if that person doesn't employ thinking, the method of thinking, the method of concentrating on a particular issue, it's not imaginable to think that the waswas, the shaitan who whispers things, will stop or will weaken or will leave him alone. He will keep giving him waswasas, and he will be busy following those waswasas. But if you use fikr as a method, as an alternative, to preoccupy this person's mind, then waswasas will stop. So it's a good method to fight against waswasa, inshallah ta'ala. So I think we finished this topic, and we may stop here, instead of starting a new subject, inshallah ta'ala. Then we can continue with a new topic next week, inshallah. Any questions? Okay, it seems there is no question. So may Allah keep you all in good health, inshallah ta'ala, and also may Allah give you a very powerful sabr. Inshallah, jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Fi aman.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam, hojam. Thank you so much.
Alaikum assalam, hojam. Take care.
Barakallahu fiikum.